Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Bexley Public Library. My name is Leah Boyden, and I'm the Community Outreach Librarian. We are excited to welcome those of you in person and those of you online. It's our pleasure to host our third Bexley Day presentation in partnership with the Bexley Historical Society. In partnership with the Society, we also have a project honoring century homes in Bexley. If you would like to learn more about this project, I will be at a table in the back to see if your home qualifies. Now, a little bit about tonight's speaker, Larry Helman. Prior to his retirement, he was a partner at NBBJ, where he managed an extensive number of major planning projects globally. He received a Bachelor's of Science and a Master's of City Regional Planning from The Ohio State University. He and his wife, Kay, are the parents of 2 Bexley High School graduates. Larry is a very active member of the Bexley community and has served on many committees and boards. Excuse me. He is a trustee of the Bexley Historical Society, and along with his fellow trustees, loves sharing Bexley's rich history with its citizens and the broader community. Please join me in welcoming Larry Helman.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you could come. The very first thing is my wife has warned me that if I put my hands across my face, she's going to physically come up here and tie my hands together. So a couple of upfront things. We are a volunteer organization. We don't have staff, and we always could use money. So we would love it for those that are not members to become members. You can do that online pretty easily. We do have a donation jar in the back, and do not hesitate to pass there if you would and put a couple dollars in. That would be really, really great. Also, our thanks as the Bexley Historical Society for the library and Leah and her great people and staff. It's been wonderful, and partnerships are what Bexley is really all about. I would also like to welcome those people that are online. That includes Susan Quintence, who's somewhere in Wisconsin, and Mayor Ben Kessler, who's probably watching from a laptop in his canoe in Maine. So we say hi to them. One other announcement, we will have another fun event. Ann Russell is handling this, and it will be on Wednesday, October 29th, and it's going to be a haunted Bexley tour. Bus tour, ride the beat, Halloween decorations, people can wear costumes, spooky Bexley stories, there are some, trick-or-treat swag bags, cider and donuts at Jeffrey, so be on the lookout for that. That would be our next event. So, the first 2 talks really centered on Bexley and its evolution. The first basically covering residential neighborhoods, and the second on East Main Street. So we thought maybe it's time to do one just basically on stories. We trade in stories, and they give meaning to the events in our lives. They connect us to others, and their stories and our stories are our identity and help ground us in time and space. So this is about stories. So the first story, and I'm going to try something here. I'm not sure this is kind of going to work, but because Bexley has this English background, I'm going to tell this story as if I was an Englishman, and we can see if we can figure this out. So it was a holiday morning, and the kids were all noodling in bed, and so I decided to take a hike, and so I walked out the cottage and walked up the lane to the pike, and since it was a holiday, there were a few motor cars on the pike, so I decided to walk towards the ancient waterway and did, and I was really headed towards passing the monastery. Can't understand me. I knew it. Hey, I got something to tell you. Okay, we're off to a good start. So, and then to walk past the monastery and maybe catch a sight of the Jacobean mansion in the woods. And when I then walked the path along there, all of a sudden there were brambles and I couldn't see clearly. And as I looked across the waterway, something appeared in my eyes. And I didn't quite know what it was till I looked at that, and I could not believe my eyes. It was a big green dinosaur. Okay, so now we'll stop there with that. Now we do a little bit of audience participation. First, anyone other than my family can figure out what the path was. What was the path? Just yell it out if you know it. All right, the family can tell it.
What was the what?
Walking from our house to Broad Street, down, and so there's the seminary, or the monastery rather. There's the path, and then there is the peekaboo. And what I instantly did, seeing it, oh, and I'm sorry, there's a second question. Who believes this is a true story? Well, who believes it's fiction? Who doesn't care at all? Okay. A Bible, it's a true story. It's a true story. So I went home and I got the kids out of bed, and they were young. I can't remember their ages. They were pretty young. And so we walked down, we kind of did the whole thing again and asked them to say, what's that funny thing over there? And Daddy, it's a dinosaur. And then, so that was it. We didn't have, this is pre-cell phones, so there's no easy way to take a photo, and so no record of it. And then one day, it wasn't there anymore. It was gone. And never could quite figure out what happened to it. And so, as near as I can figure, this occurred on those two houses, two structures, basically. One's an office, one's a house. It's off of Nelson on the west side of Alum Creek. The one has pretty extensive area along the creek. A couple little structures down there, probably shelters and so forth, and that's where the dinosaur was. And then when I looked to who owned that property at the time, it was a guy named Brown. I don't know, it was Brown with an E, so I don't know if it's Brownie Pavey or Brown Pavey. And he owned a gift store called The Selections on Main Street. Some of you may remember that. I think his brother was Dr. Charles Pavey, who had the Pavey property and was an obstetrician that delivered thousands of babies in Columbus. So I'm crediting the dinosaur to him, and that he put it down there, and he also was a donor to the Columbus Library, because he put a outdoor sculpture piece at the library, so an arty kind of guy. But the fact of the matter is, we don't know. And so this story begins as a mystery, and it ends as a mystery, because we don't know what happened. So you can decide for yourselves how you would write in the end of the story. But I would end this, and pardon the plagiarism, and I won't sing it. You know what the song is. Puff the magic dragon lived by the creek and sat solemnly there, so solemnly, so we could take a peek. Then one sunny morning, the dragon was no more, and its shape, its color, and its memories fades into Bexley's lore. So, story number one. Story number two. Get my slides working here. Bexley. I hate to tell you, but there's more than one. There are 4 Bexleys on the globe. There is one, and I've already forgotten which one of these is which. One is in Australia. One is in New Zealand. And of course, one is in England. We'll cycle back on that. And then, of course, our sweet little spot that we call home. And I want to focus really, though, on, so there's New Zealand, there's Australia, and Bexley, England. So I want to focus on that for a second. You'd be happy to know that in terms of baby names, Bexley is the 1,125th most favorite name for a baby. So if you ever wanted to name somebody Bexley, and they were from Bexley, you could say, my name's Bexley, I live in Bexley, and somebody would, well, never mind. It would be like the who was on first and who was on second. The name Bexley comes from 2 Old English words. Bex, B-Y-X-E, which is a box tree, Bex, and then Lee, L-E-A-H, Lee, a meadow, Bexley. And how appropriate for a place that's a arboretum, because in effect, that's exactly what we are. Now, by way of comparison, most of those places are pretty big, and I'll really only go through the England spot. It was an ancient village that then got subsumed into suburban growth in and around London, and it got quite big. It's 24 square miles versus our 2.5, 250,000 people versus our 14,000, 93,000 households, we have about 4,000, 90 schools, and 100 parks. So by way of comparison, you know, there you go. And then sometimes you can't make this stuff up. One of the suburbs that infilled around the ancient thing of Bexley was Albany. So Albany's everywhere. Albany's there and Albany's everywhere. The next one, and I have to read this. So following on to the same thing, I think most of you know that Bexley was named in a meeting at Jeffrey Mansion, and Mike's family, the Kilbournes, Lincoln Kilbourne, came up with that name, and that's what stuck. And I'm going to read this. I hope it's not too long. We found when we were cleaning up in there an article from about 1907 that framed the discussion that occurred when Bexley was named. So here goes. Bexley is the latest proposed village in Franklin County, and therefore it hangs a tale. The people who live just east of Alum Creek in the Bullitt Park district, but who claim Columbus as their business home, have been having troubles of their own recently. These troubles all arose over the annexation project. In the highlands east of the creek, there are several notable houses which attract the attention of all who pass that way, including city councilmen, in favor of annexation. These homes are worthy of notice, not only because of their beauty and architecture and landscape, but because of the records and careers of their owners. This is Bullitt Park proper. It may be bounded in a general way by the west by the creek, north by Atchison, which was actually Maryland, by Cassidy Pike, and the south by Main Street. In Main Street stand the stately buildings of Capital University, and along the Winchester Pike to the south, clustering in the shadow of the institution, is a gold mine of happy and contented cottagers. It was only the casual wanderer southward from Main Street who was aware of they called them Arcadians. This group of contented villagers who without corporation or without laws built their own houses, kept their cows and pigs and flowers, and knew of no troubles with their neighbors or anyone else. Even the city council, Columbus, it stated, to make Columbus bigger and better, knew not of the place, and plenty and quiet, and the number who spread the tale about the pike and the classic shades. Then came the demon, publicity. Some stumbling member of Columbus Council proposed to take the city limits, everything east of the creek, down to Livingston Avenue. He didn't know what we was about, but then the entire council went out to look what they was chagrined that a community so good-looking and so desirable had managed to keep its light under a bushel and elude them for so long. The matter was settled at a glance, and a meeting of the city council soon afterwards, they were voted into town, and with them the burden grounds to the north with the landed gentry. But those folks were not idle. They had a meeting called it Haddon Hall, which I didn't call, the country seat of Robert H. Jeffrey, who of course had been mayor of Columbus, but now opposed annexation. And he did kind, and they all sat down to talk about what to do to avoid entering the graft-ridden city of Columbus. All went merry as marriage bells until somebody said something about organizing a village and cheating rapacious Columbus with its sewers and graft, its police and burglars, its fire department, incendiaries of the prey. It was suggested, just faintly, remember, that it might be well to organize two villages, one to embrace Arcadia on the south, what I call Luthernville, and on Main Street, and the other to take in the barons who inhabit the Capitol Hill at the north. Therein lay the fatal mistake. The Bullitt Parkers own automobiles and saddle horses and play golf and tennis. The Winchester Pikers go to none of these things, but chase the unwilling pig, tether the calf, and coax the Plymouth Rock into abundance yield of eggs. The dwellers of Acadia lost no time proceeding to organize a village of their own, only leaving out the Bullitt barons, but taking in a few of sympathizers north of Maine. And they decided to make the new baby Pleasant Ridge. Bullitt Park, meanwhile, through Major McLee Wilson, attempted to form a village of its own called Parkview. but found that there were not enough freeholders who were voters to give 30 names to a petition, most of the property standing in Wyeth's names. Ha ha, smart businessman. Then on bended knee went the mighty swashbucklers of the North and pleaded to be taken into Pleasant Ridge. They promised to be good, and Thomas Knoss, who represented the 300 acres of vacant land, said they would stand for speed ordinances or anything else if they could only get in. At first, Arcadia was obstinate. It reversed the old phrase, said, you may have chiefs in the Northland, but we have lords in the South. And so they finally agreed to meet, but at what cost? No sooner had the barons got a look in than they began to complain about the name of the village, Pleasant Ridge. To them, it was never due. It was not suggestive. It was not euphonious. It was not the name of a house, but it was the name of a house of call on the old National Road, nearly a century ago. A roadhouse, heaven forbid, a modern village composed of men of influence, standing shouldn't be called Pleasant Ridge, and named after a common roadhouse, said the lords of the manor. The silk socks have their way. Again, the Arcadians succumbed, and a committee was appointed to change the name, and report was to be final. The troubles of that committee had never been equaled, and the Southsiders were 2-to-1 in number, as it always was. The Silkstocks had their way. The good old names like Pikeville, Adlersburg, Jones Station, Buckeye City, and Noblesville were dismissed without a struggle. The Arcadians gave up, however. Lady Smith, suggested by ex-mayor Jeffrey, was repudiated as being unmasculine and a general bore. Mayfair for Lincoln Kinboard brought no better results. Burlington Gardens from Frank Rutherford, these were all developers and owners back then, were treated with disdain. Melrose, a tentative suggestion of Claude Meeker with a possible idea of advertising his own property, was frowned upon. Parkwood, a genial suggestion by Chester Shepherd, met with a cold shrug. Major McLee Wilson's idea of Allencrest was considered too suggesting of baking powder. R.C. Kyle, a real Highlander, tried Thrums and was expelled from the meeting. Windermere, a last-minute idea from George Latimer, Kaufman Latimer, if you remember that firm, who favored annexation, only brought him more looks. Thornton from Anton Rule owned a bunch of land north of Maryland, who had clambered over ancestral estates. Professor George Leonard's idea of Briardale would have sounded good had he been further from Main Street. When Frank Holtzman, who became mayor, suggested Bayrenth, they said he was trying to ring in his business. Louis Lang, one of the most public-spirited, was threatened with eggs when he timorously suggested Bingen, B-I-N-G-E-N. So Mr. Deeds, Mr. Hoffman, they had no good response. Finally, the name Bexley was agreed upon, principally because it seemed neutral and no one knew what it meant. When it was discovered that the original Bexley at Kent closely connected with the lords and the aristocracy, there will be dues to pay. The Arcadians do not like carpet tacks, are good for automobile tires, and they will not vent their anger on saddle horses. And no use for straying golf balls. There are other ways to get even. So there you are, the story from the paper from way back in time. This story is a little more fun. Well, they're all fun. This is a picture of Amelia Earhart. And this is her famous gyrocopter. It flew as an airplane. It also flew as a helicopter. And the reason behind this story is that in the 20s, air travel was coming new, and it was a fresh idea, and everybody's really excited about it. And Amelia was hired to really promote air travel. And at that time, there was no airfield whatsoever, and a field called Norton Field out at Hamilton Road and Broad, the southwest corner, was established in 1923. It's just a piece of, it's just grass with a hangar. And you can see on the map where it says Norton Field, but then you also see the Port Columbus Airport on the upper side. And the number, the folks, get my notes. The list of people who had flown into Norton, pretty impressive list. Jimmy Doolittle, Charles Lindbergh, Orville Wright, Billy Mitchell, Curtis LeMay, and Amelia Earhart. And so Columbus decided it was time to do a real airport, and they hired Charles Lindbergh to come in and do a study. And he did, and he said Norton Field was way too small. It was 100 acres, wasn't big enough. And so he said the better property would be north of 5th much larger acreage, and it was close to the railroad track, because at that point in time, the planes couldn't fly over the Allegheny Mountains. So you'd have to train. If you were going transcontinental, you would fly this far, and then you'd get on a train, walk across the street where the old terminal was, and you'd get on a train, and you go on the other side of the Alleghenies and get in your Ford Tri-Motor and keep going. So the airport did get established there, and through the good work of Edgar Wolf, publisher of the Dispatch, and Don Casto Sr., the shopping center guy. So Norton became basically a training field, and there was it in its original form. One of the cool things that happened, and this was really reported by Kenny McClure, who was the mayor before David Madison, and he rode his bike over to see this, if you can imagine. And it's the Graf Zeppelin showed up as a visit. And this thing was huge, 2 football fields long, had a crew, I'm told, of 36 and took 24 passengers, so a big, big traffic. And it went overseas. It did 1 million miles. And the first transatlantic flight was Don Casto on it, because he was so excited about flight. So he thought this was really, really cool thing. And it was only a single bike ride away to see these kinds of things. So the only thing left today from that are street signs. So that subdivision, you go through there and you can see all of the names showing up on the street signs. And that's really all that's left of that. Next story. Most of you probably heard of this, but at one point in time there was a amusement park at Main and what is now Elm Creek, but Elm Creek Drive didn't exist back then. And it was founded by a guy named Robert Norwood, bought ground in 1941. Park was in existence till about 1957. 40 rides, Ferris wheel, outdoor picnic areas, kind of a fun area. And there were a ton of rides. And in this particular picture here, if you remember John Brennan, our former mayor, that's John Brennan as a kid, riding a ride. And but it was a great place to be. But when and now of course it's Pump House Park. And let me back up to this one. What you don't see, you can see the creek, and to the right is Bexley, of course. To the left is Columbus, and you don't see Elm Creek. So when the freeway came in, Elm Creek Drive came in and really changed the whole nature of that area. And the other thing which most people don't know about this area is this particular piece of ground is called Pump House Park, been there for a long time. And the reason it's called Pump House Park is for what you don't see. And what you can't see is because of all the floods that occurred. 1913 flood was devastating to Columbus, killed 93 people, and thousands, tens of thousands of houses destroyed. And so floodwater remediation was an important thing. So under this piece of ground is a tank, a double-layer concrete tank that holds 2.5 million gallons of stormwater. And it was installed to have a place for stormwater to go so it didn't just flood the street. So you can drive, that'd be a great story. Hey, kids, you know what's underneath that? Well, that's what's underneath it. Another quick story. Pardon?
What year was the amusement park? When was that?
Amusement park, 41 to 57. Yeah.
When was the tank built?
I'm sorry?
When was the tank built?
Storage tank.
The storage tank.
When were they put in? I couldn't find that date, but I'm thinking it was right. It was after the 1913 flood, and probably within the early 20s. So
before.
yes, correct. Find me a polo field. Okay, we've already told you the answer, so that's an easy one. There were a couple. A developer named Charles Johnson was a lawyer, but he became a developer, and he did some pretty neat stuff. If you've ever been on North High and you see Northmore, that's worth a drive through there, because a guy named William Pitkin, who was the guy who laid out Upper Arlington, laid out Northmore and laid out Beechwold. And both of those areas have a unique street system. They're not a grid. They follow different paths, Beechwold especially. And so Pitkin also did East Moore, but it was a modified grid. And if you wonder why East Moore Drive makes that big, sloopy bend, it's because it had to move around a polo field. And polo field in the middle of that, you can obviously point out the area. And the polo field's dimensions were 300 yards by 160 yards. And they had stables and they had everything there. And stables burned down, and so that was it, and it was time to convert it to housing. And of course, the polo folks, who basically were Walter Jeffrey and the Johnsons, founded Rocky Fork Country Club, where polo still exists to this day. And so that's where you can kind of see their logo. And then when you see it, so there's the beginning of it, the curving around. The house lots, just they couldn't make the grid quite work, so they left a big median in the middle, which is great. And so that's the local polo field. Getting your kids to school, another story. So this one's about transit. And the first transit in Columbus were horse-drawn streetcars. That began in about 1863, survived till about 1885 or so, when electric trolleys came into play. And this picture is of the Pleasant Ridge School, which was south of Maine, a couple blocks south of Maine, and it was the school. And so you did have a trolley line that went to the school to pick kids up and to take them to school. The Bexley trolleys lasted until 1948, and because they were then replaced by buses. And the reason I bring this one up is because, and World War II had some, and so here's where I'm headed with this thing, you'll see in a minute. This is Parkview in its really early stage. And you can see it was kind of country road and gravel. These are kids walking to school down Parkview. And then this map, now this will take a little vision here. If you see to the far, far right, you see Alum Creek, the little curvy thing, and then you see a line going straight up and it makes an L to the west, to the left. That was the trolley line up Dawson, and it stopped right in front of the Jeffrey Mansion. So the Jeffreys had their own trolley line to pick their kids up and to take them to school. So lifestyles of the rich and famous, so there you go. Traffic circles. I wish Ben were here. This would be fun. We could talk about medians at the same time. Traffic circles were kind of a big thing at turn of the century when Bullock Park was laid out in the 1880s. Because it was a cool thing. The first traffic circle was, I'll pronounce this wrong, Arc de Triomphe, whatever, in Paris. And thank you. Not my favorite language. I love the language, actually. No, and that is an interesting traffic circle because it has, let me get this right, 10 two-way intersections, 2 one-way intersections, and no lane markings. So pure French in terms of how that operates. But they were a cool thing to do. And so when Bullock Park was designed, they did that, and they also had the outer ring was a carriage lane, which was a carryover from designs that had occurred near in time. But obviously people hated it. I mean, they didn't like it. It interfered, you drive around in circles. Little did they know what would happen if they lived in our day today. But then here's some interesting thing. We also found, digging through some of the files, all right, to make sense out of this, the street on the left with the little circle is Drexel. Doesn't come all the way down right now. And then the street at the bottom is Main. So one of the suggestions was a traffic circle at Fair that then connected with this angle street coming all the way across, and the angle street almost touches where Cassidy would be. Well, aren't you glad that one wasn't built? Wouldn't that have been fun? And so this is what did get built, which is the Dawson Circle. and you see it coming down and trying to connect in. So someone in their right mind managed to make sure that that didn't happen, because that's what your street system would have looked like. Drexel going down all the way and then hitting this funny angle street. So didn't happen. But then, so here's what did happen, and the circle became a very focused kind of heart, if you will, of Bexley. And just for namesake here, the traffic circle capital of the world is Carmel, Indiana. It has 138 of them. But I think New Albany's not that far behind. I think they can catch up. Okay, this one's another. The first story started off being a mystery. This is going to sound like a mystery too. Conversations with the Dead. Most of you are familiar with the Twin Lakes that you pass through on College Avenue heading out of Bexley. Also, it was called Winchester Pike. And most of you are familiar with that little itty bitty island that's out there too, if you've paid attention to it. Okay. So what happened over time with that huge piece of ground is that it became a golf course, then it became a subdivision, and pretty soon it was all used up. But I want to take us back a little bit. Before any of that happened, it was owned by a fellow named Emil Ambos, A-M-B-O-S. Peter Ambos, his dad, was in the confectionery business, and Emil decided to go into the liquor business. He stepped up, you know, and the only problem is he died at 57. So whether that was part of his work, I don't know, you don't know. But he basically bought 100 acres at Livingston and College, or Winchester Pike, and it was a pleasure farm. It was just a fun place to be. He loved to fish. And he had friends come over. He lived downtown on Town Street. He'd come out, he'd bring kids, they'd play. They had pigeons and cows and all kinds of stuff. But what he really loved to do was to fish. And so his gravestone at Greenlawn is showing him exactly how he'd sit on that little island sometime and just fish. But here's the rest of the backstory. He had a 17-page will when he died in like 1899. And his goal was to give 30 acres to the city of Columbus for a park. And so the city council mulled it over, went back and forth, and decided, and they said, no, we're not going to do it. I said, okay, fine, we'll just sell it and it'll be a farm, whatever. But then somebody had this, you know, maybe we should reconsider. And they said, okay. Now, I'm not making this up. Where's the Bible? Here you go, not making this up. So somebody on council said, okay, I'm going to hire a medium, and we're going to contact Amos in the ever after and see if he's still interested in selling the ground. So they did. And so he got his report, went back to council and reported to everybody. It says, well, no, Amos thinks you're a bunch of cheapskates and he didn't want to sell the land anymore, so the deal's off. So that supposedly is a true story. So there you go. All right, and then we always kind of talk about houses. So a couple of houses here as we begin to wrap this up. And both have their story to it. This house, there are a couple of houses in Bexley that might surprise you as to when they were built. This was a house built in the international style in 1936. And there were a whole bunch of German architects. Peter would know this better than I. Walter Gropius and Mies van der Rohe and a bunch of guys. And they were tired of ornamenting houses with all kinds of decoration and all. So they were after functionality. Let the material stand for what it is. Clean edges and clean lines. And they called it the international style. And there's a couple of these. That one's 1936. And there it is today. Nice house. And then this guy at Parkview, and Bexley Park and Gould, southwest corner, also done in supposedly 1936. But the interesting backstory to this is that the Nazis at that time in Germany hated the international architectural style, which basically then forced these architects in order to practice what they believed and to design what they believed in, they had to leave the country. Good for them. And they came to the United States. They came to, some of them went down and they later on practiced in Israel. And so today that style it kind of peaked in the 50s and not so much in the 70s. And then there's this little sweetheart. This is at the northwest corner of Powell and Gould, the Martha Washington House. And probably what most people don't know about this house is that it's a Sears catalog house. And I'll talk a little bit about Sears catalog houses, because a lot of facts about that. And I think we have time for this story. So a guy was in charge of the lumberyard business of Sears Roebucks. It wasn't going very well, and he couldn't figure out what to do. So he came up with this brainchild. Said, well, why don't we sell kit houses that people could assemble, and that way we could sell a lot of lumber. Well, it was a great idea. Went on from 1910 to 1942, only stopped probably because of the war. 70,000 kits were sold. There were 370 different house plans, 44 different styles. They changed over time as architectural preferences changed. They cost at that time between $360 to $2,900. This was a $2,900 guy here. And it would come on 2 boxcars. And so you'd have to get that delivered to your lot, and you'd have to find a builder willing to construct it, like, Legoland. It did not come, and everything was clear. This piece goes here, this goes here. And there were stampings on all the beams so that you could look at it. It did not come with plumbing, heating, or any mechanicals. That was on you. And there were no masonry houses because it cost too much to ship the bricks. But a lot of innovations occurred with that, because they had like built-in china cabinets, telephone niche, American names, Martha Washington. Who wouldn't want to own a house named Martha Washington? Medicine cabinets, 1,000 to 1,400 square foot, and they all fit on 40-foot lots. And in Bexley, there's about 12 of these that are in existence. And there's an article actually on our website, if you want to look at, that talks about what some of those other houses are. And before I finish the last, if anyone's been counting, that's 10, but there's 11, of course. But before we do that, I'd like to ask Karen Boker to stand up. You knew that was coming. Come on. Karen Boker has produced all of these shows you've seen over the last 3 years, slide by slide, suggestion by suggestion. And it would not be possible without her incredible dedication. So, love you. And she is also the city's very talented advisor to the Architectural Review Board. Okay, last one. I had occasion to be at the Grandview Library a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and I noticed this nice-looking orange brick bungalow kind of house. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. And so there it is, and it's next to the parking lot of the Grandview Library. Then here's another yellow brick bungalow cottage right next to the Bexley parking lot and the Bexley Library. What are the odds of that? What are the odds of that? So that's it. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. And there also all of this is on video and are on YouTube. And I'm not saying this because of me. The simplest way to see any of these YouTubes is you put in Larry Helman YouTube and it goes right there. So what can I say? So at any rate, any questions you have, I'd like to answer them. Those are the 10 plus 1 stories.
If anybody has any questions, I think I'm muted. I'll unmute this. And if anybody has any questions, just put it in, just say it into the microphone so people at home can hear.
We were told a few months ago from somebody that lives in Eastmore, who's done a lot of studying about Eastmore, and he talked about the polo fields, and he said that he was told by some old timers of Eastmoor that they had attempted to incorporate Bexley into Eastmoor, but that Bexley refused at the time, that they wanted it to be part of their city?
Correct.
Or their area?
Correct.
Did you say that, or did I miss that?
I don't know that for fact, but I have heard that before, and I think it was true. Bexley, a couple things about that era, for example, because that developed at the same time. You know, Eastmoor developed, I think, in like 23. So it basically the same time frame as Bexley was developing. And then when the Depression hit, everyone, Eastmoor, Bexley, from almost Cassidy eastward, had nothing but vacant lots. Many of them were owned by people, but there were no streets. And there was no one left to build the streets because everything had blown up. So all the developers gone, everyone's gone, wiped out. And so the only way the Bexley streets from Stanwood East, got built was a WPA project. The government had to do it because they had all these lots and people couldn't build on them because there's no streets, there's no utilities, so they had to do that. And I say that because the council then at that time, and as they moved forward, they had a mess on their hands because they had no money to do anything. They couldn't get anything underway. And so the thought of taking even more more lots and more difficult was probably a bridge too far for them. Just couldn't do it. And would it have made a lot of sense? Yeah, it would have made a lot of sense. But the irony also on that as we think about our school system, the school was offered a lot of those lots for their tax value, but they were onesie-twosies. And so we could have had a lot bigger school site had we had any, but the school didn't have any money. So it was just a tough time. So it didn't happen. And Bexley remained the 2.5 acre or 2.5 square miles that it is today. But any other questions or thoughts? Yeah. I'm sorry. Sure.
Here you go.
You do now. There we go. Sing to us.
This is a pretty lame question probably, but goes back to story number 1. How big was this dinosaur?
It was big. I mean, it was probably at least from here to the wall. And it was a Sagittarius, had the big long swooping neck and had a big long swooping tail. And if you walk that area, you'll see there's a lot of flat land on the other side. And I think it was a party spot. I think Brown Pavey had a lot of parties down there. And where he got this thing, and you know, the reason about finishing up the story in anyone's individual mind, I don't want to imagine that it ended up in a scrap heap someplace. I want to imagine that it exists in some playground someplace, or it's on, I don't know where, the Ark of the Covenant park down there. I don't know where it is. But you want to believe that it's still around because it was magnificent.
That was a fabulous story.
Thank you. Do you have a question? I have a question about Preston and Park. I mean, I've lived here my whole life, and I've heard all sorts of stories about, it used to be part of Bexley, it wasn't part of, John Wolfe wanted to be mayor, and Columbus, and it moved. I mean, what's the truth? Do you have?
The question is? The question is
Preston and Park,
right.
Those streets. The question is, were they ever part of Bexley?
Oh, no. Okay, yeah, here's the story behind that.
Yep.
We may go far enough if you remember where the Bob Webb houses are on Park, where the newer houses are. That was the Carlin property and the Latimer property at one time. And that was carved out, and that was actually in the city of Columbus. And the reason for that is that Robert Wolfe, who headed up this was before the flood, 1908 Parks Plan for the city of Columbus. And there was a lot of improvements done on the west side of town. The Griggs Reservoir, preserving all the parkland on the left-hand side of Dublin Road, and all that got done. And so I was like, what are we going to do out east here? And so he basically bought all the land of Wolf Park. That's why it's named Wolf Park. And then he convinced David Nelson to donate his land, so you have Nelson Park. And then he wasn't totally, completely altruistic, so he decided to carve some of the land off to do his own subdivision, which is Preston and Park. And he couldn't, having chaired the parks plan for the city of Columbus, it would be a little difficult for him to say, but I'm going to put it in Bexley. So he annexed it to Columbus, but at the time there were only 2 voters. He needed 2 voters. And so Latimer existed on that property. Wolf existed on his, 2 votes, and that's why the piece. Later on it got transferred back into Bexley. And but so that's why all that property stayed in the city of Columbus. And at one time, that property, the square we're talking about, cut out. That one, it was proposed to be a condominium project. Wouldn't that have been interesting? And of course, that went over really big. You know, people really thought, whoa, that's great. Let's have a condo project right in the middle of all of that. And that got flamed out.
I was in on all that.
Okay.
I lived at 311 South Parkview at that time.
Yeah.
We hired attorneys and so on, and we went down. We had to go to Columbus City Hall because we were asking them not to allow the condominiums.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. I can give you a pretty good date on that.
Yeah.
That would have been in the early 70s.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it was the mid 70s, right? And then the other thing that happened with that piece of ground was all of the houses face Parkview, even though some of the houses are up front and some of the houses are behind. So the reason for that is because no one wanted to front a house on Westland. Everybody wanted a Parkview Avenue address. And so even though there's houses sitting behind houses, they all have Parkview addresses. So Bob Wedd did a wise thing there. So yeah, perfect.
Larry, you talked about the 1913 flood, but how about the 1959 flood, which was really devastating for all that area?
It did. It tore it up. I mean, the stories of the 13 flood are so hard to hear. I mean, it was just because the levee broke, and that's same with the 59 flood. Although there were more levees in place on 59, there wasn't anything hardly in place in 13. And you know, people hanging from trees, and they couldn't get to them because the rushing waters was a wall of water, and it just took. And ironically, this was when balloon framing took place on houses, and that means that the house was kind of structural unto itself. So these things, with the floodwaters hit, and the whole house would lift from the foundation and just go down the creek, just go down the water. And so there'd be houses floating down, horses going by, people going by, nothing you could do. And then, of course, it took out the bridges and did all that, too.
That was mainly Scioto River, though, didn't it?
Well, it was all the rivers. Every city of any consequence that was near a water, all through Ohio, massive devastation. Name the city. I mean, Dayton, Zanesville lost. I mean, it's just every single city. It was a traumatic event. Same thing, frozen ground, heavy rains, no absorption left on it, no warnings. People didn't have any warnings. The only warning was, what's that sound? And that's all they had. So it's a pretty sad deal. And now pretty much solved out. And Columbus was supposed to have put in floodgates. They didn't do that. But after 59, they did. And I don't think they've ever been used, but you drive through Old Dublin Road, there's the wall. And there's a sealed thing, and there's a wall that can be picked up and slid in there as a water barrier. Never been used, but it's there.
They did shut it that year that they had the floods in Iowa. They did shut both of those down.
Yeah.
The one on McKinley Avenue, the one that's over close to 104.
Yeah. Yeah, and the city that got hit the hardest was Dayton. And so they finally had to do a major project. They did like 4 earthen dams and bought up a bunch of land and created the Miami Conservancy District to saw it. So it was a big deal, So And hopefully, and there are pictures of Elm Creek at way up Main Street. I mean, it's almost to the, so there was a lot of water that occurred at that time. So most of it, I think, it found its way to my basement. So there you go. Anybody else? Okay, well, if on your way out, take a cookie, but first, look at that Century Homes. If you got a Century Home coming up on 100 years, contact Leah and get your sign and signed up. Before you leave, get a cookie, but remember that donation jar is back there. Do not forget our donation jar. Thank you so much. Yeah. We'll take checks. We'll take crypto, Bitcoin, yeah, we're good for anything. So thank you.